In the glittering expanse of Harrington Hall, where chandeliers hung like frozen stars and violins threaded the air with delicate sound, Lady Evelyn Harcourt stepped across the marble threshold with the hesitation of a doe sensing hunters. Her gown, pale ivory silk inherited from her late mother, shimmered softly but bore a cut out of fashion. To Evelyn it was a treasure, to the assembled aristocracy it was an invitation for scrutiny. She felt their gazes prickling before she had fully entered. Whispers began even before she reached the foot of the staircase. Two young ladies, resplendent in jewel-toned gowns, leaned together with pointed curiosity. Evelyn caught fragments. Poor thing, provincial. Surely the Earl could do better. Their murmurs lingered like moths around a flame. She had grown accustomed to judgment, yet tonight it pierced deeper, perhaps because she knew the reason for her summons. Her father intended to remind her that she was promised, and promises could not be undone. As she crossed the ballroom, the scent of roses mingled with beeswax and champagne, creating a perfume that belied the sharpness beneath. Lord Ashcombe stood near the orchestra, tall and impeccably dressed, his expression as cool as the marble columns framing him. A man of pedigree, reputation, and a heart rumored to be as warm as winter stone. Evelyn had been promised to him without ceremony, without consultation, without affection. Ashcombe did not acknowledge her, though his mother did. Lady Ashcombe's fan snapped open like a weapon as she addressed a cluster of guests with feigned delicacy. "My son," she announced, "has been patient with the Earl's daughter. One hopes she proves worth the inconvenience." Genteel laughter followed. Evelyn's cheeks burned, though she forced them into neutrality. She retreated toward the balcony doors, seeking a fragment of solitude. The night beyond beckoned with its cool calm, a contrast to the suffocating brightness inside. She had nearly reached the threshold when the atmosphere shifted, as though the air held its breath. A murmur rolled across the room. The War Duke had arrived. Duke Aldrich Hawthorne, hero to some, threat to others, entered with the quiet authority of a storm approaching shore. Broad-shouldered beneath a black coat embroidered with silver thread, he carried a scar along his jaw that caught the light like pale lightning. His presence commanded attention, not through flamboyance but through the impression that he had seen darkness deeper than any among them could imagine. Evelyn froze, hand poised above the balcony handle. She had heard of him, of victories, losses, his wolfish resolve. She had not expected him tonight, nor the sudden hush that followed his steps, as though society feared to speak in his presence. His gaze swept the room. People bowed, curtsied, offered greetings rehearsed to perfection. He acknowledged none until, by some silent instinct, his eyes met Evelyn's across the marble expanse. The moment stretched. Not romantic, merely startling, like winter wind against an unguarded throat. His eyes were steady, unflinching, the eyes of a man who had weighed life and death without sentiment. Evelyn felt her pulse stumble, not with attraction but with something sharper, recognition. Here was someone who saw the room not as elegance but as a battlefield of veiled intentions. Before she could look away, Lady Ashcombe's voice rose again, sharp with performative sweetness. "Ah, the War Duke favors us. One wonders if even he has heard of the Earl's daughter's impending match." The words struck like a slap. Several heads turned toward Evelyn. The humiliation she had tried to outrun surged back. She willed herself still, though her fingers trembled. Aldrich's gaze moved to Lady Ashcombe, unreadable. "I cannot say I keep track of every arrangement whispered in drawing-rooms," he replied, polite but edged with cold. "But I observe what stands before me." "And what stands before you, Your Grace?" Lady Ashcombe asked. A young woman displaying more grace beneath scrutiny than most could manage in comfort. Silence followed. Evelyn's breath hitched with shock and gratitude she dared not reveal. The Duke explained nothing. He moved toward the center of the room, accepting a glass of wine without breaking stride. Whispers resumed, fiercer now, circling Evelyn like predatory birds. Some expressed fascination, others disdain, but all shared the same undercurrent. Why had he spoken for her? Evelyn escaped onto the balcony, drawing in cool night air scented with distant rain. She pressed her hands to the railing, letting the cold anchor her thoughts. The music behind her resumed, but its charm felt brittle. Even as she sought calm, she sensed movement. Turning, She found the Duke standing just inside the doorway, half in shadow, half in moonlight. He had not followed her, only paused, as though caught by some unspoken consideration. Their eyes met again, and this time there was something in his expression she could not decipher. Not softness, not desire, but intent. As if she had become a question he meant to answer. He inclined his head, a rare gesture of acknowledgement. Then he stepped back into the ballroom, disappearing into candlelight and murmurs, leaving Evelyn with a single chilling realization. For a long moment she remained motionless, the night air whispering around her as though urging her to understand what had transpired. Never in her sheltered life had someone intervened on her behalf in full view of society, let alone a man forged in war. His brief defense had shifted something within her, subtle, fragile, yet undeniable. She felt the tremor of it like the first stirrings of a storm. She wondered if he spoke out of impulse or some quieter motive waiting to reveal itself. A faint unease threaded through her as she imagined the whispers that would multiply by morning. Yet beneath that fear was a spark of something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or the hope that his notice might not bring only ruin. The night seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see which thread her fate would follow. The War Duke had noticed her, and society would not soon forgive it. The morning after the ballroom, Harrington Hall hummed with quiet tension. Sunlight fell in golden shafts across the parquet floors, yet the warmth could not reach the chill in Evelyn's heart. Her thoughts lingered on the War Duke, on the faintest curve of his mouth, the shadow that crossed his scarred cheek, the way his gaze had lingered as though measuring something unseen. It was unsettling, this awareness that he had noticed her in a room crowded with polished nobility and whispered judgments. And yet, there was a small, unbidden thrill, like discovering a secret door in a house she had thought she knew entirely. She retreated to the library, seeking the comfort of books, the scent of old parchment and leather binding her nerves. Father's study was empty, and the maid had left the tea tray by the window. As she poured the fragrant liquid into her cup, a small object glimmered on the windowsill. A coin, black and silver etched with a wolf's emblem, the emblem she had only seen in the Duke's signet ring. Her fingers trembled as she held it. It was not merely a token. It was a declaration, subtle and perilous, a whisper of attention that could ignite society's scrutiny. She turned it over, imagining the hand that had placed it there, and the intensity of his eyes the night before. This small circle of metal bore a weight far beyond its size. It was proof that he had observed her, remembered her, and perhaps claimed her, in some indelible way. The hush of the library was broken by the approach of footsteps, light, measured, deliberate. Evelyn's heartbeat quickened. She did not turn. The presence was familiar before it spoke. "The coin suits you," a voice murmured from the doorway, deep and edged with restraint. She started, then recognized the timbre she could not forget. "Do not let it fall into the wrong hands," he continued, stepping fully into the room, his dark coat brushing the Persian carpet. "Some will see a gesture like this as scandal rather than courtesy." I do not understand why it is here," she admitted, fingers curling around the coin, her voice small yet steady. "Why me, your grace?" He paused, considering. "Because you possess more dignity under scrutiny than most of those who parade themselves in grandeur. And because I observed you last night, standing alone beneath the weight of whispers, and found it remarkable." His words were not praise, not flirtation, they were recognition, something far rarer. Evelyn's pulse caught. Recognition was a dangerous thing in a society where visibility could destroy as easily as it could elevate. Yet here it was, offered without manipulation, without demand. The moment was interrupted by the distant chime of the hall bell. Gossip traveled faster than horses in London, and whispers of her encounter with the Duke had already begun circulating. By mid-morning, servants brought news that the coin had been seen in the hall by more than one curious observer. The implications were immediate. Speculation. Not admiration, not respect, but scandal. Some suspected the Duke had impropriety in mind. Others questioned her virtue. Even her father's steward, usually indifferent to gossip, noted the stir with unease. When her father returned, he found her in the library, the coin clutched in her palm like a fragile jewel. His eyes narrowed as he took in the evidence of attention. "Lady Evelyn," the Earl said quietly, I trust you understand the precarious position in which you stand. This token, whether intended as courtesy or challenge, will be misread by every observing eye. You are promised to Lord Ashcombe. A word from me or the Duke could endanger all we have preserved. His hand rested briefly on hers, a gesture of protection, yet tinged with warning. Do not mistake this for approval. Society is merciless. Evelyn looked at the coin, at her father's solemn gaze, then back to the empty fireplace. I only wished to know he noticed me, she confessed, her voice trembling with a fragile honesty. I did not wish scandal. Her admission hung between them, fragile as glass. The Earl's sigh was a gust of ancient wind. Intent matters little to those who observe. The world will see as it wishes. By afternoon, the whispers had reached their apex. At the estate's garden party, Evelyn walked the rose-lined paths under a canopy of polite conversation and concealed glances. Lord Ashcombe approached, his composure as flawless as his tailored coat. I hear the Duke has taken an interest in you, Lady Evelyn, he said smoothly, voice silk over steel. Surely you understand the consequences of such appearances. His glance was not gentle. It carried the threat of financial and social ruin, the unspoken pressure to comply with duty over desire. Before she could reply, the War Duke appeared once more, arriving without announcement. He moved with the unerring grace of a predator and yet bore the restraint of a gentleman who understood the dangers of discovery. He approached her quietly, bowing only slightly, and handed her a folded note. No envelope, no seal, only words scrawled in bold yet deliberate handwriting. Grace under scrutiny is more formidable than any armor. Keep your courage. Evelyn's fingers shook as she read it. The Duke's message was a gift, yes, but a provocation, a spark meant to ignite curiosity and fear in equal measure. The murmurs around them grew louder. Society could sense the tension, the near imperceptible bond forming in plain view yet shielded by civility. Whispers carried across the flower beds. Did you see her? The coin, the note. The Duke is entangled with her. Her cheeks burned, and her heart raced, but there was also a strange warmth, a recognition that someone had chosen to see her, even under the unrelenting gaze of scrutiny. Aldrich did not smile, did not bow. He merely observed her as one might a rare flower, noting its beauty, its resilience, and its fragility. Later, her father drew her aside. A shadow of worry etched across his face. You must be cautious, he urged. The Duke's attention is no mere accident. If society interprets this token as affection, your position with Lord Ashcombe could be imperiled. And yet, you cannot deny the power of his gaze. It is unlike any other. Evelyn's lips parted in silent acknowledgment. She could not articulate the conflict raging within her. The allure of attention from a man of such dangerous magnetism versus the safe, prescribed path that had been chosen for her. As twilight descended, Evelyn returned to her chamber, placing the coin beside her mother's locket on the dressing table. She touched them both with trembling fingers, feeling the weight of inheritance and temptation alike. The day had begun with whispers, escalated through tokens, and concluded with a delicate balance of fear and hope. In the quiet of her room, she allowed herself the smallest breath of possibility, even as the threat of scandal lingered like storm clouds on the horizon. From her window, she glimpsed the shadow of the War Duke moving across the distant gardens, a silent reminder that he watched, that he had intervened, and that he would intervene again. Society would not forgive, her father would warn, and Lord Ashcombe would watch. Yet the seed of change had been planted. The coin, the note, the Duke's observation, they had shifted something irreversible. Evelyn could not unsee him, could not unread his words, could not ignore the presence of a man whose very recognition altered her world. And though she feared the consequences, a pulse of anticipation thrummed through her veins, suggesting that the coming days would not be gentle, nor would they be safe, but they would be impossible to forget. The final echo of the garden party lingered in her mind as she lay on the chaise, the coin heavy in her hand. The room darkened, the last embers of light flickering across the silken draperies. Outside, rain began to fall softly, pattering against the windows in a rhythm both soothing and ominous. She pressed the coin to her heart, a talisman, a warning, and a promise. The War Duke had made his mark, quietly, dangerously, and the world was already watching to see how she would respond. The storm began as a distant murmur, a low roll of thunder that threaded through the corridors of Harrington Hall, and by the time Evelyn reached the east wing, it had grown into a symphony of rain against the slate roof. The guests of the evening had dispersed, drawn to supper or secluded conversations in small parlors, leaving the estate nearly deserted. Candlelight flickered across polished banisters, throwing long shadows that danced like restless spirits. Evelyn moved with careful steps, clutching her shawl about her shoulders, seeking refuge from the oppressive weight of rumor and expectation. Every whisper she had endured today had settled like dust upon her shoulders, yet it was the memory of the War Duke's eyes that unsettled her most. They lingered, always lingering, an uninvited flame in her mind. She rounded the corner of the long corridor and paused, heart stuttering. The air was heavy with ozone, the scent of wet earth creeping in from open windows. He was there. Duke Aldrich Hawthorne stood beneath the archway that led to the drawing-room, as if he had been waiting for her. His coat was damp, the edges clinging to the sculpted lines of his shoulders. One gloved hand rested casually upon the mahogany railing, yet every inch of his posture exuded readiness, alert, controlled, and impossibly dangerous. The storm illuminated him in flashes of lightning, casting his scarred profile into sharp relief against the dark paneled walls. For a long moment, neither spoke. The room was empty, but the tension between them was suffocating, palpable, as though the space itself had narrowed to contain only the two of them. Evelyn felt the familiar prickle of awareness, that instinctive knowledge that she was being observed, studied, measured. And yet, here, in the hushed corridor, she could breathe in a way she had not dared among society. She could speak truths that had been buried beneath the polish of etiquette and the weight of promises. "Lady Evelyn," he said finally, voice low, as if carrying the sound of distant storms, "you move as though the weight of the world rests upon your shoulders. Do you believe it does?" I do not know," she admitted, stepping closer, the fine lace of her sleeve brushing the railing. "It is not the world, perhaps, but society. Their eyes, their whispers. I cannot escape them." Her voice quavered despite her efforts to steady it. "Even within my own home, I am measured, discussed, predicted. I am expected to bend, to yield, to comply." He nodded, slow and deliberate. "And yet you do not break." The edge of steel in his tone softened, just enough to reveal faint curiosity, admiration, and something unspoken. "I observed you at the ballroom. You did not faint, nor did you flee, nor did you crumble under their scrutiny. There is strength there, Lady Evelyn. Strength that the world does not appreciate, but that I recognize." Recognition. The word struck her like a sudden gale. No one had ever spoken to her in that way. Not her father, not Ashcombe, not the women who measured her beauty against the latest fashion. To be seen, truly seen, was dangerous, and yet irresistibly intoxicating. She wanted to recoil, to flee from the implications, but she remained rooted, sensing the storm within him mirrored her own. "I do not understand," she whispered, her fingers tightening around her shawl. Why notice me at all? I am nothing to you. A promised daughter, a pawn in the games of men more suited to power than feeling." He stepped closer, the lightning momentarily illuminating the intensity in his gaze. "You are not nothing," he said, firm and unyielding. "You are visible. You are honest in ways that frighten the people around you. I have seen enough of the world to know that such honesty is rare. It is worth more than I can easily name." Evelyn's pulse quickened, a strange warmth rising from her chest. Here, in the dim corridor, surrounded by shadows and rain, she felt the dangerous allure of confession. She wanted to speak, to reveal the tremors of her own longing, the shame and hope that warred within her. And yet, Victorian restraint, ingrained and unshakable, held her tongue. "I cannot imagine," she said carefully, voice low, "that anyone of your station would concern himself with a girl like me. There is Ashcombe, my duty, my promise. You must know that even this conversation is perilous." He inclined his head, as though accepting her truth, yet his dark eyes glimmered with defiance. "Duty does not always align with what is right, Lady Evelyn. You speak of promises, yet promise is a fragile shield against conscience and heart. I have left battlefields where men died for honor. I have witnessed courage and folly. I know the weight of vows. And yet, I also know that some things are worth pursuing, regardless of peril. The words sank into her, a tidal pull against the restraint she had nurtured all her life. She wanted to look away, to deny the rising heat in her cheeks, but lightning illuminated the corridor once more, and she could not escape the raw, unshielded force of him. "And you would pursue— what exactly?" she asked, her whisper almost drowned by the storm. He drew closer still, the distance between them charged with unspoken promise. "I would pursue that which does not flee from truth. That which bears grace beneath scrutiny. That which endures judgment without surrendering spirit. You, Lady Evelyn." Her lips parted in quiet astonishment. She had anticipated confrontation, perhaps a challenge to her propriety, but not confession. Private, deliberate, dangerous confession. Her chest tightened as the storm outside mirrored the tumult within her. Every rule of etiquette, every inherited caution, every thought of Ashcombe and obligation screamed for retreat. Yet she did not move. She did not flee. She listened, entirely present, entirely vulnerable. For an interminable moment, neither spoke, the corridor alive with the rhythm of rain and the distant rumble of thunder. The room held its breath, waiting. Then, as if compelled by lightning itself, their hands moved closer, almost touching, separated by a breath, by hesitation, by restraint. "If you were free," he murmured, voice low, laden with unspoken consequence, "would you choose me?" Evelyn's throat tightened. She could not answer. Her lips would not form the words, though her heart, unbidden and defiant, leapt toward him. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes, not of fear, but of longing, of shame, and of the exquisite pain of recognition. She understood suddenly that society would never forgive such an acknowledgment, yet her spirit trembled at the intensity of it. A sudden noise from the hall, a footfall, a door creak, shattered the delicate moment. Both turned, instinctively alert. Shadows flickered along the walls as the storm's fury grew, and in that brief interruption, the world intruded once more. Evelyn realized, with a jolt of dread and longing, that the privacy they had found was fragile. The gaze of society, the vigilance of duty, the threat of Ashcombe, all waited just beyond the corridor, ready to punish any misstep. She stepped back, pressing her hand to her chest, heart racing, mind awhirl. He did not advance, did not speak, only allowed her retreat, the intensity of his gaze holding her captive even as she pulled away. And in that measured restraint, Evelyn understood something profound. The War Duke had chosen to see her, and that choice, dangerous as it was, would shape every day to come. Outside, the storm raged on, wind lashing the trees, rain beating the stone. Inside, two hearts stood poised on the precipice of confession, longing, and peril. And in the distance, faint but unmistakable, came the unmistakable echo of footsteps, someone approaching, someone who would witness, someone who could change everything. The next morning, Harrington Hall trembled beneath a different tension. The storm had passed, leaving the gardens glistening with rain, petals heavy with droplets, and cobblestones slick underfoot. Yet within the grand estate, a far more perilous tempest brewed. Word of the previous night's private encounter had reached the wrong ears, as rumors always did, and the drawing-rooms buzzed with quiet speculation. The Earl, summoned by urgent notes and hushed voices, entered the morning hall with measured steps, a face both grave and weary. Evelyn awaited him in the library, clutching her mother's shawl, a fragile shield against the world's gaze. "My daughter," he began, voice low and deliberate, "there is talk in the halls about last night and the presence of the Duke." His eyes were heavy with both concern and paternal disappointment. "You must understand that appearances, however innocent, are judged far more harshly than actions." He paused, the weight of centuries of social expectation pressing upon him. "Lord Ashcombe is no longer patient with rumor. The engagement must proceed without deviation. You cannot, will not, allow yourself to be ensnared by the attentions of a man whose reputation, though illustrious, carries peril." Evelyn's fingers tightened around her shawl. She had imagined her father's admonition countless times, but hearing it spoken aloud, coupled with the awareness of Aldrich's observation, stirred something she could neither name nor dismiss. "Father," she said softly, I do not seek scandal, nor would I bring harm to our house. But I cannot feign indifference where there is recognition, nor pretend to fear a man who has seen me, truly seen me, without threat." Her words struck the Earl like a sudden wind. He could not deny the truth in them, yet he feared society's retribution and Ashcombe's wrath. Before he could respond, the library doors burst open, and Aldrich stepped in, unannounced, unyielding, and entirely composed. His presence commanded the room as though it had been prepared for his arrival alone. Rain flecked his coat, hair damp against his temples, eyes fixed on Evelyn with an intensity that made the air tremble. "My lord," the Earl began, stiff with authority, "I cannot permit—" "Permit what, sir?" Aldrich interrupted smoothly, voice low and deliberate. "To notice a woman of virtue beneath the weight of gossip? To recognize courage in its quietest form? I have observed Lady Evelyn, and I find her remarkable, and I intend to make that observation known." The Earl's face paled, a flicker of shock crossing the features he struggled to control. "Sir Aldrich, you are aware of her engagement to Lord Ashcombe." "And I am aware," the Duke said, stepping closer, "that duty is not always just, that promises can be used to bind hearts where affection is absent, that courage and grace are rarer than titles or land. Lady Evelyn will not be judged solely by her station. I will see her honor upheld, regardless of whispers and vows." The room went silent. Even the servants in the hall paused, uncertain whether to retreat or witness the confrontation unfolding. The air was taut, every particle vibrating with the unspoken battle between social propriety and raw, undeniable truth. Evelyn's pulse quickened. She felt the weight of observation. Ashcombe would hear of this, society would note it, her father would tremble. But there was also a spark, a sudden and thrilling warmth that rose from the recognition she had longed for. "Enough," the Earl said finally, his voice firm yet edged with despair. "This discussion cannot occur without decorum." And yet, his gaze shifted to Evelyn, searching, pleading. "You must understand the consequences. Your life, our house, your reputation, it all hangs by a slender thread." Evelyn drew a deep breath, the courage of the last storm night coursing anew. "Father," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor of emotion beneath, "I cannot live a life chosen by others. I have tried to obey, to endure, but obedience without heart is no life at all. I must speak for myself." Aldrich's expression softened, a fleeting smile brushing the corners of his mouth, though his eyes remained dark and intense. "Then speak, Lady Evelyn. Speak, and let the world hear the truth it fears." At that moment, the library doors swung open once more, and Lord Ashcombe entered, his presence cold and composed, yet laced with unspoken menace. "It seems," he said smoothly, voice glacial, "that my promised bride is subject to influence. I trust the Duke will remember that society does not forgive indiscretions lightly." Aldrich did not flinch. "Indiscretion," he said, voice low and dangerous, "is seeing courage where others see weakness. It is noticing honesty where others manufacture decorum. Lady Evelyn is not an indiscretion, she is a person, and she will not be treated otherwise." Ashcombe's eyes narrowed. "You presume too far, Your Grace." "I presume only as far as truth allows," Aldrich replied, stepping closer so that the space between the two men seemed to crackle. "If honor demands, then let mine be spoken aloud. I seek Lady Evelyn, and I fear no man's vow when it binds a heart against its own will." Gasps escaped the Earl, Evelyn, and even the few servants who had lingered. The air vibrated with the audacity of the declaration, the shock of a man willing to challenge society itself for recognition of a woman's courage. Ashcombe's face, previously controlled, now betrayed a flicker of uncertainty, a crack in the polished veneer. Evelyn's pulse raced. 4 years, she had been defined by duty, whispered about in parlors and ballrooms. Now, here was a man, a duke, willing to defy the conventions that sought to cage her. She felt tears prick the corners of her eyes, tears not of fear but of hope. The storm within her had been mirrored, recognized, and defended. And then finally, her own voice emerged, trembling yet resolute. "Father, please. I cannot live a life chosen by fear. I cannot marry without heart, without recognition of my own will." If there is truth to be upheld, let it be mine to speak, and mine to live." Aldrich's eyes softened, the storm behind them momentarily giving way to a rare vulnerability. "You have already spoken, Lady Evelyn." "And I," his voice faltered, just enough to reveal the weight of sincerity, "I will follow your truth, whatever it demands." Ashcombe, realizing the tide had turned, paled but said nothing. The Earl, torn between duty and paternal love, exhaled slowly, realizing that the fragile balance of social expectation had shifted irrevocably. Outside, the gardens glittered with wet leaves and shattered light, reflecting the subtle tremor of change sweeping through Harrington Hall. Inside, two hearts had been acknowledged, one voice had declared independence, and the world waited, breathless, for the repercussions. And just as the first flickers of candlelight touched the library walls, a servant entered with a folded note, bearing news that threatened to undo the fragile victory. Lord Ashcombe had sent word, the engagement could not be broken without consequence. Finances, reputation, social standing, all hung in a delicate balance. Evelyn's hands trembled as she took the letter, her pulse echoing the thunder she had once feared. Aldrich's gaze met hers, unwavering, a silent vow passing between them. Whatever storms would come, he would meet them. Whatever forces sought to separate them, he would not yield. Yet the path ahead remained treacherous, lined with whispers, threats, and the relentless scrutiny of a society that prized appearance above truth. Evelyn folded the letter, pressing it against her heart. For the first time, she understood the magnitude of the choice before her, between duty and desire, between fear and the courage to claim her own life. And though the shadows of consequence stretched long, she felt, for the first time, a heartbeat of possibility, a promise that recognition, courage, and love might yet survive in a world that demanded conformity. The final echo of that tense morning lingered, a quiet note of anticipation in the halls. Outside, the rain-soaked gardens reflected fractured light, as if mirroring the fragile but growing hope within the library. And in that shared silence, Evelyn and Aldrich understood that the declaration had been made, the resolution begun, and the stage set for the trials yet to come. Rain fell in relentless sheets as Harrington Hall's stone courtyard shimmered under storm-darkened skies. Lightning split the horizon, illuminating wet cobblestones and the distant spires of the estate in stark, fleeting clarity. Inside, the grand hall, normally serene in its polished order, buzzed with an anxious energy that betrayed the weight of impending confrontation. Evelyn Harcourt clutched her mother's locket to her chest, the fragile chain cutting softly into her palm. A letter from Lord Ashcombe lay folded at her side, threatening the delicate victory she and Aldrich had claimed only hours before. The engagement could not be broken without ruin, and yet her heart would not yield. Duty and desire collided violently within her, each insisting on dominion. Aldrich Hawthorne appeared in the hall, silent as the storm yet impossible to ignore. His coat, drenched, clung to his shoulders, his hair darkened by rain, eyes storm-dark and unwavering. He did not speak at first, allowing Evelyn the fragile space to collect herself. The moment was suffused with the weight of anticipation. Servants hovered in the shadows, the Earl's hands trembled as he considered his daughter's peril, and the echoes of whispers from last night's rumor-laden corridors seemed to haunt every polished surface. "I cannot allow this," Evelyn said finally, voice trembling yet resolute, "not without facing it, not without confronting the forces that would bind me." Her words carried authority she had only recently discovered in herself. "If we yield to Ashcombe's threats, we surrender not only our hearts but our courage." Aldrich stepped closer, the space between them charged, almost unbearable. "Then we will not yield," he said, low and deliberate, "and we will meet the storm with truth. Whatever Ashcombe threatens, finances, reputation, social wrath, it matters little against the weight of what is right." His fingers brushed hers briefly, the contact sending a shiver of certainty through Evelyn. "I will not leave you to face it alone." At that instant, the heavy doors burst open. Lord Ashcombe entered, his coat still dry, expression a mask of civility that barely concealed fury. "Your defiance is remarkable," he said, voice silk over steel. "But do not mistake courage for immunity. Society will not tolerate this scandal, and the consequences—" "Consequences," Aldrich interrupted, voice cutting sharp as a blade. "Do you think threats of gold, lands, and whispers frighten me? I have faced death on battlefields far crueler than your civility, Lord Ashcombe. You presume to bind a woman's heart, to weaponize promises as chains. I will not permit it. The room held its collective breath. The Earl, torn between social caution and paternal instinct, remained silent, though his eyes glimmered with hope. Evelyn's chest heaved as she realized the truth of Aldrich's words. Here was a man willing to challenge the weight of custom itself, willing to fight for her recognition, her voice, her choice. Ashcombe's lip curled with thinly veiled menace. And if I expose impropriety? If I make your connection known to London, Duke? Will your honor protect her from scandal? Aldrich's response was calm, unflinching, imbued with quiet fury. Honor does not reside in secrecy, nor in fear. It resides in action. And I will act to shield her, to protect her, and to ensure that truth, not whispered judgment, prevails. The storm outside intensified, rain pelting the tall windows like shards of glass. Lightning illuminated Aldrich's scarred jaw, his expression carved with determination, the aura of command nearly tangible. Evelyn felt the tremor of power radiating from him, the certainty that he would stand against any foe, that he would confront consequences head-on. For the first time, fear of scandal did not anchor her heart. It was eclipsed by the confidence of his presence, his protection, his choice. Suddenly, a servant delivered a second letter, trembling as he approached. Evelyn took it with tentative hands. The seal was broken, Ashcombe's hand unmistakable. The letter detailed threats, financial ruin, exposure, societal ostracism. Yet Aldrich read it calmly, scanning each line with meticulous focus. Then, with a swift motion, he drew the edge of a desk open to reveal papers of his own, documentation of Ashcombe's long-standing financial misdeeds, evidence of embezzlement and deceit that would ruin the man if revealed. Your threats are meaningless, Aldrich said, placing the papers before the Earl. Every word you uttered is null against the truth. This estate, this family, this lady, none shall suffer because of your arrogance. His gaze turned to Evelyn, softer now, almost tender. You may choose freely, Lady Evelyn. I will face all others, but your voice must decide. Tears pricked Evelyn's eyes. She had feared exposure, feared scandal, feared the crushing weight of social expectation. Yet now, in the presence of a man who had risked his name, his station, and his peace for her recognition, fear transformed into clarity. She stepped forward, her voice ringing with unwavering authority. Lord Ashcombe, I release myself from your claim. I will not marry you. My life, my heart, my choice, these are mine alone. Gasps echoed through the hall. Ashcombe's face betrayed disbelief, then fury, as the papers before him exposed the fragility of his influence. The Earl, relief washing over his features, allowed himself a subtle nod. Aldrich's eyes, dark and intent, met Evelyn's, conveying the weight of unspoken vows and shared understanding. Aldrich extended his hand. If you still wish it, Lady Evelyn, he murmured, voice low but resolute, choose me. Here now, with truth as witness, and fear as powerless against our will. Evelyn's fingers closed around his, her pulse quickening, not with hesitation, but with certainty. I choose you, she whispered, the words carrying the full weight of her defiance, her longing, her courage. The storm outside seemed to pause, as though acknowledging the resolution within Harrington Hall. Ashcombe, defeated and exposed, could only retreat, his threats nullified by evidence and the unwavering alliance of two hearts united in purpose. The guests, who had witnessed the confrontation, murmured in awe. Some gossiped quietly, but the power of the moment was undeniable. A woman had spoken her truth, and a man of formidable presence had stood to honor it. In the quiet that followed, the storm outside softened to gentle rain. Candlelight flickered across Evelyn's face, illuminating the delicate flush of relief and triumph. Aldrich's hand remained around hers, firm yet protective. You have been brave, he said, voice soft, almost reverent. And I am honored to stand beside you. Evelyn's heart swelled. For years she had lived within the rigid constraints of duty and expectation, yet now she felt the intoxicating freedom of agency, recognition, and love earned not through compliance, but through courage. The rain tapping the windows seemed a benediction, the light through storm-darkened clouds a symbol of clarity and hope. The Earl approached, placing a hand lightly on Evelyn's shoulder. "You have chosen wisely," he said, his voice imbued with pride and relief. "And he has proven himself worthy." Evelyn met her father's gaze, gratitude and love mirrored in his eyes. Aldrich pulled her gently into the center of the hall, and for a long, suspended moment, they stood together, hands entwined, eyes locked, hearts aligned. The weight of judgment, threat, and expectation had fallen away, leaving only recognition, courage, and the promise of shared life. And as the candles flickered and the last echoes of the storm faded, Evelyn realized the truth she had long sought. Love, when recognized and defended, could conquer not only societal chains but the most enduring fears of the heart. The war duke had returned from battle not to conquer lands, nor to claim trophies, but to honor what was worth fighting for. Outside, the gardens glistened, rain-washed and trembling with light. Inside, two hearts had found their sanctuary, and the world, at least for this moment, could only witness. The storm had ended. The choice had been made. And in the quiet aftermath, the only certainty was the promise reflected in each other's eyes, that courage, love, and truth, once acknowledged, could never be undone.